Timotab, and today I'm going to solve exclusive internal skyscraper yin yang by yttrio. If you would like to try this puzzle for yourself, it'll be the first link in the description. Let's have a look at the rules. Normal Sudoku rules apply. So we're going to place the digits 1 to 9 once each in every row, every column, and every box. Yin Yang, shade some cells such that all shaded cells are orthogonally connected, all unshaded cells are orthogonally connected, and no 2x2 area is fully shaded or unshaded. What does that mean? That means we are going to shade some cells in this grid. And let's have a look at a potential pattern. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so we've got the dark green shaded cells and the light green unshaded cells. The dark green shaded cells are all orthogonally connected. So that means that I can go from any shaded cell to any other shaded cell, only going up, down, left, or right, and only traversing through other shaded cells. If I had this one as shaded instead of unshaded, then this would not be orthogonally connected and so would not match the requirement. And this section of unshaded would not connect to the other orthogonally, the other unshaded cells orthogonally. There we go. Put my teeth back in. Additionally, if I had that arrangement, then that would also not work because I would have a 2x2 area of unshaded cells. Okay. Cells with arrow clues are internal skyscraper clues. Each cell in the grid represents a skyscraper with a height equal to its value. A digit in a clued cell gives the number of skyscrapers visible in the indicated direction, not including the cell itself, where every skyscraper blocks the view of all skyscrapers with the same or lower height behind it. So, what does that mean? If I had, say, this arrangement, I think that's going to work. Yes. So from the perspective of this cell, it sees the 7 because that's the first digit. It's always going to see that. That is considered like its height 7, a building of height 7. This is a building of height 1, so the building of height 7 obscures it. You can't see it. But the building of height 8 is taller than the 7, so you can see that from here. The 9 is taller than the 8 and the 7, and the 2 is shorter than a building that is before it. So you would only see the 7, 8, and 9, and then this would be a 3. Okay. All cells seen as skyscrapers from a clued cell must be shaded. And all cells in the direction of the clue not seen as skyscrapers must be unshaded. So what that's saying is that if this were the disposition of the digits, then we would have to shade them in this way, so that the digits that are seen by this clue are shaded, and the digits in this direction that are not seen by the clue are unshaded. Okay, that's all the rules. I am going to restart the puzzle to reset the timer, and let's begin. All right, let's talk about some secrets of yin yang. First of all, I cannot have this pattern in a yin yang, a 2x2 of checkerboard. That is because when I try to connect the green shaded cells together, the unshaded cells are isolated from each other. There's no way for this cell to get out orthogonally to attach to this one. Doesn't matter what route I take, that happens regardless. And if I start with connecting the unshaded cells, I'm going to have the same problem with the shaded cells. That gives us a related problem, potentially, with the border. Now, I can have the border be all one color, or I can have it as one stretch of one color and one stretch of the other. But if I try to connect or to have the shading on the border like this, then as soon as I connect the unshaded cells together, it doesn't matter which route I take, I'm always going to isolate the two shaded sections from each other. And if I do the shaded sections and connect them, then I'm going to isolate the two unshaded sections. So I can have at most two different sections of shadedness within the border. Okay. Now, one thing that I said when explaining the rules, I've suddenly realized is quite important, is that the first cell is always going to be seen by the clue. Therefore, given that it is seen as a skyscraper, and therefore, by the rule, must be shaded. So, I've got three border shaded cells. So, given what we just said about the border, either we have no unshaded cells in the border at all, or there is unshaded somewhere along here, or somewhere along here between these two, or somewhere along here between these two. And I think we need to discover where that is. Okay, first of all, it can't be completely shaded, because if it's completely shaded, then in particular, all of this and all of this will be shaded. And why is that a problem? Well, the cell here is showing the number of shaded cells that it sees in that direction, because that's how they have to be colored, how they have to be shaded for the skyscrapers that it sees. So this would have to be an 8, and this would have to be an 8. So that is not permitted by Sudoku. So that means the entire border is not going to be shaded. Furthermore, it also tells us that the unshaded section is not up here, because the same thing would happen. We'd get that the most we could unshade, because these two have to be shaded, is all of this, and then again, we'd connect all this up, and we would have an 8 here and an 8 here. So we can unshade those, or remove the shading from those. We're not unshading them, but all of this has to be shaded. That can't be where the unshaded section is. That allows us to put in some no 2x2 unshaded and no checkerboard for a shaded digit there. Okay. We do have some digits that are going to be small. That can only be 1 or 2. That can only be 1 or 2. In fact, this has to get out. That has to be unshaded. That has to get out, has to be unshaded. So this is now definitely a 2. Okay, that's nice. We got a digit. This is a maximum of 5, but it can't actually be 5 because then all of those would be shaded and we would isolate that. That's a maximum of 4. I'm prepared to pencil mark that. That's a maximum of 5. I can't see anything obvious that tells us it can't do that. That's a maximum of 4, but not 2 because we have a 2 in the column. That is a maximum of 5, except that one's unshaded, so it's a maximum of 4. And it's not actually a 1 because I can already see 2 there. Okay. All right. Because this is shaded, either all of this is shaded or all of this is shaded, depending on where the unshaded section goes. That means that one of these two is going to be an 8. So what does that mean? So that's going to be a fixed, yes, that has to, if that's an 8, this has to increase like a thermometer along the line. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. So there will either be a 4 here or a 4 here, and that's going to eliminate 4 from there. Now, okay, that's very clever. That's very clever indeed. Let us suppose that this is the first of all, I think I need to clarify one more thing that I've realized. If I've got unshading here, but not here, and that one's shaded, which is perfectly fine by the border rule, but that would mean that both of these would be the 8, 1, 2 line. Because if I have unshading here, but I allow that to be shaded, then that will necessarily be shaded, and then those two would both be 8. So I either have some unshading in the bottom row or in the top row. Now, what I have just seen is that if this is an 8, we go 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and in particular, it's the 3, 4, 5 that would go in there that's important. That would be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9. That's how this row would complete if that were an 8 and all this was shaded. That 3 here is going to mean that that is a 1. If that's a 1, then that's the only shaded cell to its right. Those 3 are unshaded. In particular, that's unshaded, but we've just said that this is shaded. So if that's unshaded and this is shaded, the most we could unshade would be those, and then this would also be shaded, and this would also have to be an 8. This can't be the 8, this is. So we can get this row in. And that is lovely. And that means that this is now shaded. Let's do the right color. There we go. That is unshaded by no 2 by 2. That is unshaded by no 2 by 2. This has to get out. So that is unshaded. Because of so there's unshading somewhere along here. Yes, there must be at least one unshaded cell along here. And this is a 1 or a 3. Well, okay, let me think about that. Right, I know that this can't be shaded. Oh, no, hang on, that could be shaded if that's all shaded, and then I have an unshaded section along here. Okay. Well, we know that this is a 2. We know that that's not a 2. Okay. I think that 9s are going to be important. Because if a clue points at a 9, then that must be the last shaded cell in the direction from the clue. And everything else must be unshaded after that. Therefore, we know that this cell points at a 9. It can't be a 9 itself, because if it were a 9, then there's no way I can point to 9 different shaded cells from inside the grid. So that is going to see a 9. That's going to be the last shaded cell in its row from the left. So that has to be unshaded. And now we know that there is at least one unshaded cell in this row. So all of this has to be unshaded. Okay. So now any shadedness that comes along here is all going to be contiguous because of this unshaded cell. Okay. So we've already determined that that can't be a 9. If this were a 9, that would have to be a 1 with all of this unshaded, but that can't be a 1 by Sudoku. Neither of these can be a 9, because if they were, they would have to be shaded for this 2 clue. So 9 is in one of these 2 cells in this box. Okay. Oh, but 9 can't be here because this would be pointing at it, and it would have to be shaded. So that's not a 9. This is a 9. That 2 clue means that this digit has to be larger than both of those. And they're a minimum of 3 and 4. So this is at least a 5. Can't be a 5 by Sudoku, so that's 6, 7, or 8. Okay. So, yes. These in this box, this can't be 9 by Sudoku. This can't be 9. Neither of those can be a 9, because if they were a 9, then this cell would have to be unshaded, because the 9 is definitively the last cell that can be shaded in the row if it's pointed at, row or column. So that would have to be unshaded. In fact, that can't be a 1 because it already sees 2 cells. And that's important because that means that that can't be shaded because now this can't be, wouldn't be 3 or 4, it would be a 2. That can't be a 9, sorry. If that were a 9, then this would be a 2. So that can't be a 9 or that, because that would make that clue wrong. That can't be a 9 because that would have to be unshaded to make this clue work. Therefore, 9 is in one of those 2. And now 9 is in one of those. Okay. Okay. That can't be a 9, because if it were 9, it would be shaded. And because that would be the last shaded cell for this clue, this would be unshaded, and we would then have a checkerboard pattern. So that's not a 9. Okay, 8. Can't go in one of those. It can't go there because that would have to be a 9 in order to terminate this, given that we know that that's shaded. It can't go there because that would have to be a 9. It could go here, making that a 9. But if it doesn't go there, it goes there. So 8 has 3 positions, I think. That would make, if 8 were here, that would make this a 3. Because it would see this digit, it would see the 8, and then it would see the 9 that's somewhere along here. Okay. All right, 9's in one of these. That's going to do some limiting. First of all, it means that these have to be unshaded because they are definitely after a pointed at 9. That makes this shaded to avoid a 2 by 2. This is unshaded to avoid a 2 by 2. That's unshaded to avoid a checkerboard. That removes 9 from there. If 9 were here, this would be a 2, but it can't be. 9 is here and is shaded. This must now be shaded because this needs to be at least a 3. And that is shaded. This has to get out. Right. And now this can't be an 8. Because if this is 8, this will see some digit that's less than 8. It'll see the 8 here. The only other digit it'll see will be a 9, because that's the only one that's bigger than an 8. And then that would be 3, but it can't be a 3. So that is not an 8. That is an 8-9 pair. And 8 is in there somewhere. That's very nice. Okay, if that's 9, then either of those is 8. They're both unshaded. If that were 8, then that would be 9. Those two would be shaded, and that would be unshaded. If that weren't 8, 9, if that were 8, with that not being a 9, then that would be a 9. Those would both be shaded, and that unshaded. Okay. All right. That is at least a 4, because it sees 2, but we know neither of those is a 9. Therefore, it sees the 9 somewhere along here. Therefore, it sees 1, 2, plus a 9, so it has to be at least a 3, but it can't be a 3 So it has to be at least 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That can see 4 through 7. Okay. That's at least a 2, because that can't be a 9. So the earliest a 9 can be is there. Oh, right. That can't be a 9, so this can't be a 1. Therefore, it's at least 2. Therefore, it sees at least 2 shaded cells. And therefore, because of the border restriction, all those shaded cells have to be contiguous. So the second shaded cell that it must see must be here. If a clue sees a 9, it's the last shaded cell in that row or column from the clue's perspective. This is definitively the last shaded cell that this clue sees, and therefore that must be a 9. Because we know it sees a 9, because those can't be 9. Right. So that's not a 9. And then one of those two is an 8 and will be shaded. But we can now make this a 2 because that sees those two and all of these are unshaded. We can now shade that cell. We can shade that cell for avoiding 2x2s. All right. And now 2 by Sudoku is there. Three's not there, so 3's in one of these. In fact, 3 is in one of these too, because we know that there is a shaded 8 there, and that makes that a 4. That just has to be smaller than 9, which it will be. That can't be a 4 by Sudoku. That can't be a 1. That could. In fact, if that is a 3, then that must be a 1. And if that's not a 3, then this is a 3. So this is a 1 or a 3. So if that's a 1, that's a 3. If this is a 3, this is larger than a 3, and not 4, and less than an 8. So 3, 5, 6, 7. Okay. All right. These 4 digits, what have we got here? We've got 4, 5, 6, and 7. And those aren't 4s. Right. This digit has to be larger than this digit, because if this was smaller than this digit, then this digit would be seen and be shaded. So that can't be a 4, and that makes this a 4. This digit, again, must be larger than this. So that can't be a 5, and that can't be a 7. And now this digit must be larger than this, so that must be a 7 or an 8. Okay. So 1 is in one of those two. Right, where to look next? Is there any more shading I can do, or just some plain Sudoku? I can put a 4 into one of those two. 3, well, this is 3, 5, 6, and 7. Go into those. Three and 5 are definitely in there. All right. This digit has to be larger than this digit. And if that's a 1, that's a 3. If that were a 3, that would be a 1. So that could be 1 or 3 with that being a 4. But that 4 is under a bit of pressure though. Okay, right. Where is the largest digit that it sees? That's here. But we know that that's not a 9 or an 8. So none of these can be 9, so that means that the 9 in this row must be in one of those 3. In fact, by Sudoku, it's in one of those 2. Yes, this clue does not see a 9. And this can't be an 8, because if this were an 8, this clue would see it, because it won't see a 9. And if it would therefore see this 8, that would make that shaded, and then that would have to be a 9, which it can't be. So that is not the 8. That is a shaded 8. This is unshaded. This is unshaded for the unshaded to get out to meet with its friends. Okay, now that we have 9 in one of those two, 9 must be in one of those two. Oh, this is a 2, because it sees the 2 digits. So, if that were a 4, this would have to be a 3 at the most, and then those digits would all have to be less than 3, which they can't be. That's not a 4. That's a 4. This is now at least a 5. So this is at least a 6. And can't be 8 or 9, so that's down to 6 or 7. That gives me a 3, 5, 6, 7 quad. That's a 1. That makes this a 3. So 1 is in one of those two. Right, this can't be a 1, can't be 2, can't be 3 because that'll be bigger than it, can't be 4, that must be 5 or 6. So this has to be less than 6 and can't be 1, 2 or 3, so that's 4 or 5. Okay. Okay. This is a minimum of 5. If it were 5, then the only digits bigger than it are 6, 7, 8, and 9, which is 4 more digits. Plus these two would be 6 digits. That can't be a 7. But if that were 6 digits with 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, I would use the 6, and that couldn't be a 6. Therefore, that is a 5. That is now not a 5. 5 is in one of those two. In fact, we could have figured out that wasn't a 5 by the fact that one of those two is a 5. These are 1, 6, 7. Okay. If this is a 3, hang on a minute. No, I just thought about this. All right. So this, the last digit that skyscraper that this sees is a 9, because there must be a 9 in this row. If the 9 were here, then it would only see 4. So the 9 is not here, the 9 is not here. This is the earliest the 9 can be. So 6, 7, 8, 9. That could work. That would then necessarily place the 9 here or here. If the 9 were here, that would be a 1, and all of that would be unshaded. Wait. Okay. If this were a 9, then that would be 6 and 7. Wait. Sorry, this would be 6, 7, 8, which would work. 6, 7, 8, 9. These would have to be unshaded. In that case, 9 would have to be here. And the reason for that is that 9 couldn't be here because that would make that a 1, would unshade all of those, and then this cell would be isolated because that would all be unshaded. So if this is a 9, that's a 9. If that's not a 9, then 9 is one of these two. So 9 is in one of these 3 cells. And now this can't be a 1 because it either sees this 9 or it sees this 9. In fact, it can't be a 5 because we've already unshaded this cell. It can't be a 4 by Sudoku. So that's 2 or 3. If it's 2, the 9 could be there or there, with unshadedness in between. That would mean that that's unshaded. If this is a 3, the 9 would have to be there, and then one of those would be shaded. So 9 in this box is either here, or it's in one of these 4. I think, yeah. Okay. Let's see if there's some Sudoku, or if there's something else. Okay, 2 is in one of those 2. And this now can't be a 3. Right, because if this were a 3, then both of these 2 cells would be shaded. So I'd have 3 shaded cells. But if I have 3 shaded cells, then I need the 2 to be in a place where there is a shaded cell smaller than it. If the 2 were here, I can't fit 2 cells in before it that are both shaded. So the 2 would have to be here. That would have to be a 1, but this one in this column is looking down there. That can't be a 1. Therefore, that can't be a 3. That must be a 1. These are now unshaded. That's very nice. Now that has to get out, so both of those are shaded. Let's shade them properly. We have a 2 by 2, so we can unshade that. We have a potential checkerboard, so we can unshade that. This has to get out. This is shaded. Now, that doesn't have to be a 9, because the 9 could be here, and that's just some digit that's larger than all of these. And that could be a 7 with 2, 3, 4. It seems, not 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 5. So that could be a 7. Could it be 6 with 2, 3, 5? That seems at least reasonable. Can't be a 5, can't be a 4, couldn't be a 3 or less. So 6, 7, or 9 is the potential fill for that cell. Oh, this cell has to be smaller than that. So that can't be a 7. 8 goes into one of these cells, and therefore one of these. Okay. Let's five, 4, 3. This cell has to be smaller than this, so that can't be a 6. Little by little we make progress. We do not quite have a quadruple there. Right. 6, 7, 8, 9. I can't have all of those unshaded. That can no longer be a 9. Because if those were unshaded, I'd have a 2 by 2 of unshadedness. So that must be bigger than 6 and not a 9. 9 is in one of those two, so that's not a 9. Right. 2, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes, this has been staring at me for ages. In the face. 2, 6, 7, 8, 9 is 5 digits. Now that the 5 has gone from there. Right. So that has to be a 6. There's no way you can fit it in otherwise. If that's a 6, this is 5. This is 7. That now has to be an 8 because it has to be larger than the 7 in order to hide it. That's a 6. None of those are 6, so that's a 6. That makes that a 5. That's a 4. That's a 3. And this is 7, 8, 9. And that's not a 9. And that's not a 7. That is now a 5, 7 pair. Okay. That's now a 1, 6 pair. That's a 7. That's a 1, 6 pair. That removes 6 as a candidate from there. Okay, if that's 7, that's 8, that's 9. That seems reasonable. That then becomes a 3 because that's shaded. That would be unshaded. That would be shaded. Okay, if that were a 9, what would that mean? If that's 7, that's 8, that's 9, that's 8, that's 7, that's 9, that would be 8, that would be 3. If that's 9, okay, that can't be 7 or 8, so that must be unshaded. That's at least a bit. So we either have 7, 8, 9, or 7, 8, and one of those is 2 is a 9. So 7 is in one of those two. It's smaller than 6, which it will be. All right. If that's a 2, That's shaded, that's unshaded. That is then 7, 8, 9, and that's shaded. If that's a 3, that's shaded but not a 9. Ah, that's the key. That can't be a 9 because we have to have a terminating 9 for this clue. There we go. That's not a 9, that is. And that is shaded. Right, I could have seen that another way earlier, but we've now got it. This clue needed to be terminated by a 9 because neither of those two, and then that was clearly the last shaded cell in the column. So that had to be a 9. All right. So now 8 is not in there or there, so that's an 8 by Sudoku. We have a 7 in one of these two, but it can't be there. This has to be a 7. If that's 7, that's 8. If that's 7, that's 8. Oh, but if that's 7, that's 8, and it can't be. So that is 8. That is a shaded 7. This is unshaded. That means that this is shaded to avoid a 2x2, to avoid a checkerboard. This is unshaded to avoid a 2x2. This is shaded to avoid a 2x2 and shaded to avoid a checkerboard. This is shaded to avoid checkerboards. This is unshaded. This is unshaded to get out. We now have completed all of our coloring. That is a 2. That's not a 2, and that is. Still don't know whether this is a 7 or a 9, or whether the 9 goes here or here. Which seems a little strange, but that appears to be the way of it. All right, so let's see what we can do with our Sudoku. That 6 is looking across. That's a 1. That's a 6. This digit must be a 4. I think we're generally in the final stretch. This is 1, 3, 5, and I don't think we know the order. Any digit there will work for that. All right. These 3 digits are 1, 3, and 4. And that's the 1 because it can't be 3 or 4. So that's a 3, 4 pair. 8 is looking down. That's not an 8. 8 is looking down. So that's the 8 there. Three is looking down there, so this is the only place for a 3. That makes this a 3 here. Only place for 4 in this column is here. That makes that a 7 or a 9. This digit is known. It is a 6, which resolves my 1 and 6 over here. That 7 means that that's a 9, so this is a 7, the 9 is here, this is a 5 and a 7. This must be a 6. This 9 is looking across at this 8 and 9. I need a 2, which must go there, a 5 in there. These two digits are 1 and 7, and I have something broken. I've got a 6 there. Why do I have a 6 there? Yikes. That's been there a while. Let me just check. I suspect that's meant to be a 1 and a 7. Oof, I hope I haven't done something with that. Yep. I just filled that in wrong, so I can do... I'm sure none of my other logic used it. Right. So I can put the 6 in there. That's now a 1-7 pair. All right. And then the 7 makes this a 1 and this a 7. That makes that 9. That makes that 7. That feels a little better. That's a 9. That's a 5. That's a 7. Okay, in these two cells, I need a 2, which must go here, and a 5. This 9 looks across at this 8 and 9. These two digits are now 5 and 8, which I can do. These two are 1 and 6, which I don't think I can do. That 5 is looking up, making that not 5. So these two digits are 3 and 6, which I can do. 3 there, 6 there. That gives me a 4 and a 3. That gives me a 1 and a 6. 1 and 3 there makes that 5. The 3 now makes that 1. That's a 3. This digit is a 6. 4 must go there. 1 here and a 5 there. That was a fantastic puzzle. Lots of good logic. Glad that I spotted that my 1-6 was not... it's just a missed pencil mark, and I didn't use it in order to make a deduction, so I think that my solve still counts as valid. But, you know, everybody makes mistakes. I figured it out and got it corrected. Anyway, thank you, yttrio, for this delightful puzzle. A little on the tougher side for what I normally showcase, but it's hard to not tempt me with a yin yang puzzle because I do enjoy them. Anyway, if you liked this solve, please hit the like button. You can subscribe to see some more, and I would love to hear your comments. I'm looking forward to next time. Be seeing you.